Tim Duncan is known as the big fundamental, and for good reason. If you want to watch a player do some fancy highlight reel moves, don't look at Tim Duncan. He's known for doing the fundamentals. Here's his signature move. It doesn't look too impressive, but trust me, it is. The moves are fundamental because they work, and when done consistently could lead to greatness. Duncan retired at the end of the 2015-2016 season after spending 19 years in a Spurs jersey, but of those 19 years, only one of them can be his best. Today, we're going to analyze stats, achievements, and defining moments to try to determine. Duncan started his 19-year run on the Spurs when they drafted him as first pick in 1997.
With the first pick in the 1997 NBA draft, the San Antonio Spurs select Tim Duncan from Wake Forest University.
Even before Duncan arrived, the Spurs were a good team. They were led by their center David Robinson, who had been on the team for 8 years already and was a former MVP. But the year before Duncan joined the team, Robinson was injured and missed almost the entire season, causing the Spurs to lose an uncharacteristic 62 games. But this year the Spurs were back. With Robinson at center and the rookie Tim Duncan at power forward, they quickly became one of the best front courts in the league. They both stood around 7 feet tall and were known as the Twin Towers. Duncan's first year on the team was also the first full year for coach Greg Popovich. Unlike many first overall picks, Duncan was placed into a positive situation. He played all 82 games, where he averaged just over 21 points and just under 12 rebounds. He also shot 55% from the field, 4th in the league and a number he would never top. Duncan did so well in his rookie season, the league felt he should get an award for it. The Rookie of the Year award seemed appropriate. Duncan played his first playoff games against the Suns. The team won 3 out of 4 to move on to the second round. Here the Spurs met the Jazz, and Duncan was matched against Karl Malone. He was too much for the rookie to handle. The Spurs lost the series in 5 games, and the Jazz went on to lose to the Bulls in the finals. Summarizing this season, the best shooting of his career at 55%, good rookie averages, an improved team from the previous year, and of course, the Rookie of the Year award. In the following season, Duncan averaged slightly fewer rebounds and slightly more points, but this time was the team's leading scorer, due to a considerable decrease in scoring from an aging Robinson. It was a shortened season, so the Spurs only played 50 games, and Duncan was in for all of them. The playoffs started in a similar way, in that they passed the first series 3-1. In the second round, they faced Shaq and Kobe on a Lakers team on the rise. The Spurs beat them in 4 straight games. They went on to face the Trailblazers in the next round, and beat them in 4 straight games. In just his second year, Duncan found himself leading his team in the finals. The opponent was the Knicks, who to this day are the only team to reach the finals as an 8th seed. The Spurs passed them without much trouble and won the championship. The entire playoff run only consisted of 2 losses. Today we think of the Spurs as an established team, with multiple championships. Well, this was their first one. It could be thought of as the start of the Spurs dynasty that lingers on today. Duncan averaged over 27 points and 14 rebounds in the series with the Knicks and was chosen over David Robinson as Finals MVP. Summarizing this year, Duncan was the team's leading scorer, won an NBA championship, and was Finals MVP. Tim Duncan is one of the most consistent players the league has seen. In his first 8 years, his points averages were all within the same 5-point range, and his rebounding average only had a range of 2. One change to mention in this year is his free throw improvement. It was up a full 10% from his rookie season. It was only up to 76%, so he wasn't leading the league or anything, but it was really good for him. This season marks the first missed games for Duncan. He missed the last games of the season as well as the entire postseason. The playoffs were much less impressive without him. The team lost to the Suns in the first round. The Lakers team that they had shut out last year was much improved and won the title. It would have been interesting to see a healthy Spurs team play this Lakers team, but unfortunately, we'll never know how that would have turned out. The biggest thing about this season for Duncan was his much improved free throw shooting. The next year, Duncan was back, for all 82 games. After I praised him so much for improving his free throws last season, he followed it up with the second worst percentage of his career. Less than 62%, almost 15% down from the previous season. Can't really explain what happened there, but everything else this year was consistent. The team did very well during the season, and passed the Timberwolves and Mavericks in the playoffs, with one loss in each series. In the third round, the fans' hopes were realized when the Spurs were matched against the Lakers. The Lakers had continued to improve, and had a perfect playoff record going into the series. Unfortunately for the Spurs, the Lakers' perfect record continued into the finals. The Lakers ultimately won the championship, sustaining one loss in the finals to earn the best playoff record ever. The Spurs were swept. It was the first major playoff disappointment for Duncan. This year, Duncan had a solid return. The next year, Duncan played every game again. Here I'll get into the stats a little, because it was his highest scoring season with 25.5 points per game. He led the league with most total rebounds with over 1,000 throughout the season, but Ben Wallace edged him out in rebounding average. Duncan beat Kobe for the most shots made, and Paul Pierce for the most free throws made. The made free throws was a result of his massive improvement in free throw percentage, from just over 60% to just under 80%. I know I keep talking about free throw percentages for Duncan when it's not one of the more important aspects for him as a player, but I just found it odd how it bounces around so much from year to year, especially for a player known for his consistency. Again, the NBA thought he did so well this year, they felt they should give him an award. The MVP seemed more appropriate this time. The playoffs again were disappointing for the Spurs, squeezing past the Celtics in the first round only to lose to the Lakers once again. This time with one victory. It was now 3 years since the Spurs championship, and the Lakers had won the championship every time since, beating the Spurs directly to do it 2 of those times. The Spurs were once able to beat the Lakers 4-0, and now had lost 8 of their last 9 playoff games against them. This season, Duncan led the league in total rebounds as well as total free throws. It was his best scoring season at 25.5 points per game. He had a much improved free throw percentage, and his first MVP selection. The next year was Duncan's second best scoring season with 23.3 points per game, but it was his best season for rebounds at 12.9, blocks at 2.9, and assists at 3.9. He led the league in none of these categories, but finished third in both rebounds and blocks. The numbers weren't far off from other years. He had over 12 rebounds in the previous 3 years, and would do it again the next year as well. He had 6 other seasons averaging over 2.5 blocks, and had only 0.2 fewer assists in the previous year. It happened that all these numbers resulted in career highs in the same year. The league felt he deserved an award. Okay, I'll stop doing that. He won his second consecutive MVP. It was a transition year for the Spurs. It was Robinson's final year, and the team was now supported by second-year player Tony Parker and rookie Manu Ginobili. The Spurs seemed to face the Suns in the first round quite often. It happened again this year, and the Spurs came out ahead as always. The second round they were met again by the Lakers, who were going for their 4th straight championship. The Lakers were a little weaker now, and had been on the decline for the past 2 years. Duncan wasn't going to let his team lose again. In Game 6, Duncan had 37 points and 16 rebounds to close out the series in a victory. The Spurs passed the Mavericks in the next round, and the Nets in the finals to win their second championship. Duncan was named Finals MVP, and Robinson concluded his career as an NBA champion. To summarize this season, Duncan had his career high in rebounds, blocks, and assists, his second MVP selection, beat the Lakers in the playoffs, an NBA championship, and the Finals MVP. Through most of Duncan's career, Robinson had been declining in skill and progressively showing his age. Each year Duncan was taking on a bigger role than the last, so when Robinson was gone, Duncan was ready to take over the team. He did slightly worse in most areas, but overall it wasn't far from his previous MVP level season. The biggest difference was his free throw shooting, no surprise. The only time it would drop below 60%. He would have won his 3rd MVP this year if it wasn't for Garnett. Kevin won it and Duncan came in second in voting. Duncan also came in second to Garnett in rebounding average. The season went well for the team, as did the first round of the playoffs when they shut out the Grizzlies. In the second round, they would meet Shaq and the Lakers for the final time. The series was knotted up at 2 apiece, and the winner of Game 5 would be at a huge advantage. With less than 1 second on the clock, Duncan came through with an incredible shot.
He gets away a fadeaway. He makes it with 4/10 left. Unbelievable.
The Spurs won Game 5. Wait, what?
They get it to Fisher. He scores! Derek Fisher scores at the buzzer.
The Spurs lost Game 5. The Lakers won the next game as well, ending the Spurs' promising season. In this season, Duncan took over the team and had a near third MVP selection. The next season, Duncan continued a slight decline with his then career low 20.3 points per game and 11.1 rebounds per game, though his overall shooting stayed consistent. They weren't MVP level numbers, and he finished 4th in voting. The season went well for the Spurs, as well as the postseason. With the Lakers team split apart, they could reach the finals without any major stumbles. The finals proved to be a close series against the defending champion Detroit Pistons. In Game 7 of the series, Duncan put the team on his shoulders and came through when they needed him most.
It is my pleasure to present the most valuable player trophy to none other than Tim Duncan. Where are you?
Duncan won his 3rd NBA championship, along with his 3rd Finals MVP. What we can say about this season was Duncan's great Finals Game 7 performance, an NBA championship, and again, Finals MVP. The next year, Duncan continued to decline statistically, though I wouldn't call it a rapid decline. His points and rebounds dropped again, giving him new career lows at the time. 3-point shooting has never been an important part of the Tim Duncan discussion, but it's interesting to point out that this was his highest percentage of his career. It's not significant since it only earned the team 6 points for the season. He shot 5 and made 2 of them. For the first time in his career, Duncan didn't finish in the top 5 in MVP voting. Not the best season for Duncan individually, but the team was strong enough to earn 63 season wins. The playoffs only lasted 2 rounds for the Spurs. The second round series was against the Mavericks and went to 7 games. The last game went into overtime and had great performances from Duncan and Nowitzki, scoring 41 and 37 respectively. In the end, the Mavericks pulled ahead by 8 points. We can summarize this season by mentioning that he made 2 of 5 3-pointers, as well as had a great Game 7 effort. In the 2006-2007 season, Duncan improved his shooting by 6%, now at almost 55%, the second best of his career, and finishing top 10 in the league. My explanation for the more efficient shooting is that this year Duncan switched to primarily playing the center position, so he had more shots closer to the hoop. This helped bring his points up from the previous year, but his rebounds set a career low for the 3rd year in a row. Duncan was 4th in MVP voting, which is better than any future season. The Spurs ended with a good season record as always, and beat the Nuggets, Suns, and Jazz to reach the finals. The final series was against LeBron James and the Cavaliers. It marked his first of many finals appearances, but he failed to win a single game. Duncan averaged a solid 18.3 points and 11.5 rebounds, but Tony Parker averaged 24.5 points while shooting 57%. Parker was awarded the Finals MVP. For the first time, it had been won by a teammate of Duncan's. After only a 1-year absence, the Spurs were back on top. This season is summarized by good shooting and an NBA championship. Duncan and the Spurs now had 4 championships, but each time they failed to repeat the year after. Duncan followed up his championship year with yet another solid season. His free throw percentage had another drastic change when it increased almost a full 10%, but almost everything else was consistent. The Suns were the Spurs' first playoff opponent. The team featured someone that had given the Spurs trouble in the past, Shaquille O'Neal. This time, Shaq's team wasn't nearly as strong as it had been in the past, and the Spurs beat them while only giving up one victory. The next round was against Chris Paul and the Hornets. Duncan didn't do great. He averaged 13 rebounds, but only 13.5 points in the series. Parker and Ginobili averaged more points than Duncan, despite playing less minutes. The Spurs were behind after the first 5 games, but won games 6 and 7. After a 3-year break from playing the Lakers in the playoffs, they were met by the Lakers in the playoffs. Shaq was obviously no longer with the team. They were now led solely by Kobe, who was the 2008 MVP. The team had gotten much better since Shaq's departure, and were apparently even better than the Spurs. They proved that when they won the series in 5 games, the Spurs had failed to repeat for the 4th time, and lost to the Lakers in the playoffs for the 4th time. The season is summarized by better free throws and beating Shaq in the playoffs. The next season was more consistency from Duncan, actually finishing the season with the exact same scoring average as the year before. Ginobili missed about half the games of the season, which was likely a big reason for the Spurs' 54-win record. Ginobili's absence was also noticed in the playoffs. The Spurs lost to the Mavericks in the first round. It was the first time Duncan had lost in the first round. It happened for the Spurs in 2000, but Duncan wasn't a part of that series. The best thing we could say about this season was some scoring consistency. The next year, Ginobili returned, but it didn't help the Spurs much in the regular season, ending with an even lower 50 wins. Just unacceptable using Spurs standards. Duncan set a new low in points, rebounds, and blocks, but did have one of his more efficient shooting seasons. They were the lower seed going into the playoffs, where they were placed against the Mavericks again. This time Ginobili must have been the difference. He led the team in scoring to beat Dallas in 6 games. The following round was against the Suns, now without Shaq, but they did have players like Nash and Stoudemire that were strong enough to beat the Spurs in 4 games. The 2009-2010 season showed better shooting for Duncan. The Spurs had struggled the last few seasons, but made a comeback in this one. Duncan set a new low again in both points and rebounds. It was his lowest decline in points, averaging 4.5 fewer than the previous season. It was also the first time his rebounds weren't in double digits. They dipped all the way down to 8.9, the second worst of his career. Duncan ended his 13-year streak of averaging a double-double. Duncan had declined, but the team was now much deeper than him. Ginobili and Parker both averaged over 17 points, and there was support from players like Richard Jefferson and George Hill, not to mention an outstanding team chemistry. Things looked great going into the playoffs. In the first round, they played the 8th seed Grizzlies and lost. Only the 4th time the first seed lost in the first round. The series didn't even go to 7 games. The Grizzlies finished the job in 6. In a streak of disappointing playoff losses, this one may have hurt the most. But in this season, we can mention the 61-21 season record. The next year was shortened due to lockout. The Spurs had won the title in the last lockout in 1999, but weren't as fortunate this year. Duncan raised his scoring average by 2 points, but everything else was basically consistent. Kawhi Leonard joined the team as a rookie, but wasn't nearly as effective as we know him today, averaging only 8 points a game. The season went well as the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. The Spurs were 8-0 going into the Western Conference Finals against the Thunder. The Thunder featured Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden, but they were all still very young at the time. But that didn't stop the Thunder from advancing to the finals in 6 games. In the finals, the Thunder lost to the Heat. For this year, we'll mention their 50-16 season record. Duncan was now 36 years old, and coming off a streak of playoff disappointments. This season went much better than the previous ones. His scoring average was back up to 17.8 points per game. Rebounds were at 9.9, and shooting was at 50.2%, all the highest since 2010. Blocks were at 2.7. highest since 2004, and its free throw percentage was up to 81.7%, highest since ever. The team's combined efforts led to 58 season wins and a great playoff run. In the first round, they were confronted by the new-look Lakers, but it wasn't a good look. Spurs won it in 4. The second round was Golden State, the beginning of the team we all know today. The Spurs passed them in 6. The third round was the Grizzlies, who had upset them in the first round 2 years before. Spurs passed them in 4. In the finals, they were matched against LeBron again, this time on the Heat. The Spurs' last championship was won against LeBron in 2007. They came close to beating him again, but the Heat were able to steal Game 6 and force a Game 7 on their home court. Duncan led his team with 24 points in the final game, but unfortunately for the Spurs, LeBron led his team to a victory with 37. The season showed across-the-board improvement for Duncan, as well as a finals appearance. The following season, Duncan saw slight decreases in almost all categories. Leonard was now in his 3rd year and starting to make a name for himself on the team. The season ended with 62 wins for the Spurs. They were met in the first round by the Mavericks in a series that went to 7 games, but the Spurs came out on top. They passed the next 2 rounds without much trouble. The finals was a rematch of the previous year. The Spurs won in a team effort. They had 5 players average in double-digit scoring, Duncan being one of them, of course. Leonard made a tremendous impact on the defensive end and won the finals MVP, the second time it was awarded to one of Duncan's teammates, and the last. This was Duncan's final championship. We'll summarize the season with an NBA championship and revenge on the Heat. In the next year, Duncan's averages were lower, but outstanding for his age. 13.9 points per game and 9.1 rebounds as a 38-year-old. The team did well in the season, finishing with a 55-27 record. It was Duncan's last chance to repeat a championship, but they fell way short when they lost Game 7 to the Clippers in the first round of the playoffs. In this season, Duncan was good for his age. The 2015-2016 season would be Duncan's final one in the NBA. He only played 61 games and had significantly lower points, rebounds, and blocks than ever before. Duncan had a much smaller role on the team, and the team was able to win 67 games in the season, the most Duncan had ever seen, but somehow still not first in the league. In the playoffs, the Spurs shut out the Grizzlies in the first round, but lost to the Thunder in the second, who lost to Golden State in the third, who lost to Cleveland in the finals. Leonard was now averaging over 21 points per game and a serious MVP candidate. Much like how Robinson left the team in Duncan's hands, it was now time for Duncan to pass it on to Leonard. The summary for this season is 67 wins and passing the torch. For 19 years, Duncan played for the same team and managed to achieve a winning record and make the playoffs in each one of them. In my eyes, his career had 3 periods, with long transitions between them, causing the lines to be blurred as to when they exactly start and end. The one where he grew with Robinson, the one where he reached his peak and led the team with some great support players, and the downward slope, where the support players became the leaders and Duncan became the support. The peak seasons in the surrounding years would be the best place to look for his best season and narrow down the search. After weighing several factors, I've determined his best season to be. Duncan and the Spurs are known for their team chemistry and unity. He was known for playing with Robinson in his early years and Parker and Ginobili in his later years. Duncan never played a season without one of these players on his team, and this was the only season he played with all 3. It was also his second best scoring season and his best season for rebounds, blocks, and assists. It was Duncan's second consecutive MVP selection, with most everything about the season being even better than his first selection. The team beat the Lakers in the playoffs after embarrassing losses to them in the previous 2 years. The Spurs were NBA champions, and Duncan was the finals MVP. Duncan had similar awards and achievements in other years, but in this one they all happened at the same time. Everything came together this season, and that's why I consider it his best. Do you agree with my decision? Let me know in the comments if you think I made the right choice, or if there's a different season that stands out to you. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching. If you like this video and want to see more in a similar style, be sure to subscribe by clicking the logo so you know when I upload a new one.